I'm Rosemary Feit Covey, and I'm here at my exhibition, Cutting Near the Edge at Morton Fine Art. I'm very happy to introduce you to some of my newer pieces as part of the Thanatopsis series. Thanatopsis is a word that connects to the cycle of life. And the poem by William Cullen Bryant, a young man who wrote this poem in 1817 on the nature of life and death and taking the fear out of it as it being part of a cycle of life and a way that all humans become one in death. So these are themes that have informed my work for the last, won't go into how many years, but decades. And I've always been very interested in how memory loss and what is under the surface connect to current and present life and memory, how the memory and current situation connect. This goes back thematically to my early 30s. For example, in the piece next to me, a wood engraving called Sins of the Fathers. In Sins of the Fathers, you see two children with layers of history and death underneath them. So this actually can be both personal, where past experiences form the framework of the present, or it can be cultural and historical. So the line from the Bible, Sins of the Fathers, continues onto the third and fourth generation. So these situations that occur under the surface inform the present. And my current work is so different from this earlier work. It's much more abstracted, but I'm still dealing with some of the same themes. You see here in the piece behind me that I'm dealing with the change of forms as they go under the surface. And in these new pieces, I'm actually dipping into the canvas, ripping it out, excavating. In fact, the term excavating comes to mind a lot with this particular work, because it's both excavated literally and figuratively. And you can actually see in person, you cannot see this when you see a flat image of this art. You really need to see this art in person, that there are areas that go into above the canvas and then in, and they're all dealt with. So the forms that exist under the surface are still dealt with, just like when I'm walking along on the many walks that I take, I look down and I'm always looking for when you can see under the ground. Under the ground where they're digging out a pipe, or where people have thrown cigarettes against a tree. I've done artwork that's more literal, that shows those spaces where you normally don't notice them, but they're actually quite interesting and meaningful, where a cigarette is down on the ground, and then you see twigs, and you see all these things layered together, and they're creating forms that would often be overlooked. So I want to make something that draws the viewer visually, but actually then represents some of these ideas of memory and loss. And in some of my work, such as Red-Handed, it's a large floor piece where you walk on people, and it again is what's under the ground. In fact, we actually put this installation piece into a fountain at Wesley Seminary at one point, so it looked like a mass grave. And that is another way of looking under the surface. But this new work is both smaller and larger because it deals with, as the poem says, with that sense of what happens after death, which I think is like a core human question that is universal. And it also deals with twigs and what you might see woven together when you're just walking. Another previous work, Panspermia, looked at the connection of those two spheres very as the core of the work. So Panspermia deals with outer space and how lichens may or may not transfer life through the cosmos. So this NPR talk was dealing with physicists and astronomers were talking about their work. And the question came up to them, when you're dealing with the entire universe and looking at contemporary things that are happening in the universe, how do you feel about living in Washington and all the politics and everything going on? Does it seem unimportant? And they laughed and said, well, you know, of course you're still interested in all of those things, but yes, it does change one's perspective when what you study is the solar system, the universe, black holes. It's a larger view of the, well, more than the world. But I think that's very interesting that also that those systems also translate to tiny systems, like how the body works and how lichens look all together. So my piece is a combination of something to do with the universe and outer space, and then these tiny lichens almost forming the stars and the structure within the artwork. So I love these connections and thinking about them and being able to, as an artist, think about both at once and not be constricted by having to specialize. So as a printmaker, I also love it that I've been able to take a flat, conventionally used as a book design, as book illustration, and take that technique and try and turn it into something large and possibly never ending, because a lot of my pieces, once I've created them, I can work on making them larger, and I have my blocks as a library of images and can extend the pieces. So, and rework and come back to an idea and get it further along. So that's what's happening here. I took the idea of the excavation and the wood engravings and made them into sculptures. So my work is becoming more and more sculptural, even though it's really made largely out of paper and wood engravings still. And these newest pieces are getting more and more so. So in this Thanatopsis piece here, there are cavities, there are growths, there are very carefully worked out areas. And an artist friend coming to this exhibition paid me the highest compliment when he said that in the pieces, if you took out any area, the piece wouldn't work. So even though these are abstract pieces, they are carefully thought out, they are carefully felt and experienced emotionally in the same way that my narrative work is thought out, and that if any element was removed, the piece wouldn't work. I've always understood that abstraction is something you move towards, not something you start with. That out of exploration, you narrow and hone down to less and less figurative. That doesn't mean I won't do more figurative work, but this sculptural work really interests me at the moment. And it's not a new thing either, because just like thematically in Sins of the Fathers, you see the early stages of looking at under the surface and what is beneath, literally and not literally. In the same way, I have been working for many, many decades on moving wood engraving away from being a book illustration form, although I still do book illustrations, I've just done one. But I'm really interested in how I've been able to, for each project, move it so much further, including like light boxes with the film in strip, which, and my pieces that were called Peep Show, which were inside Peep Show boxes, and those are all sculptural forms, but still maintaining the techniques of wood engraving that I learned from my wonderful teacher, Barry Mosher, so many decades ago, and just kind of exploring. So each thing leads to the next exploration. They are not contrived, and they are more come out of each step leading to the next. And the most recent piece actually moves completely out of being a square or rectangle and becomes purely form and, again, exploration and composition. So it's, again, part of Thanatopsis. It's like a scrap of big earth that you might find, and yet hopefully the viewer is drawn to it because it's also pretty. So I like to combine that idea of pretty so that you want to look at something and then provide more. As an artist, it's always hard to talk about it because it either works or it doesn't, visually and emotionally. So whatever I say doesn't really matter if it doesn't resonate with at least some people, but the exploration is what I'm interested in. So it's, I always feel like I only care about the piece I'm working on and afterwards much less so, because it's the work, it's the struggle, and it's the attempt to kind of get it to work in the way my artist friend said, so that every element of the piece is connected and yet is not in a totally expected way. So that's the goal.